as Chris said, it is standardized auxiliary boat operations, and it's called radio communications. So some references. The boat crew seamanship, and I know you will see things on that says it's obsolete. However, it does have a very good section on radio communications and radios, and that's in chapter 11. So if you can, and you can Google that if nothing else, boat crew seamanship manual, and it should come up. Chapter 11 is a good source. There's also a radio telephone handbook, and there's one that was put out in January 2013 and one in July 2018. I think they're pretty much the same. However, the 2018 may have some newer information. Again, a good handbook.
Not seeing there.
People can see the slides, correct?
Yes, Tom, we can see them.
Okay.
Yes.
The another reference is the Auxiliary Boat Crew Handbook. It's the one. It's ABQH 16974.52C for Charlie. That is the newest one, and that was put out in February 2024. Other references, if you're looking for the SABOT PowerPoints, they're on the auxiliary website. If you type in cgaux.org, and then in the lower left column, there's a box where you can type in, if you're looking for type in SABOT. When it comes up, select SABOT and Operations Training -USCG aux, and then once that loads, scroll down to the PowerPoints, which is what we're using here, although I've added a few things, but is the ones that were developed by the 9th Eastern region. So that completes the references. Using the radio telephone, some basic on VHF radio telephone, know your radio set and how it works. Of course, your reference on that's going to be your manual and some training. Be alert, speak in a confident tone, speak slowly. A deep voice is easier to understand. Keep mic out of the wind when talking. Key the mic before starting to talk. If you don't key it and starting to talk, no one will hear you. Release the mic after you finish talking. Release the push to talk button after each phrase or two to allow another station to break in if necessary. Ensure receiver volume is turned up high enough so you can hear and detect signals, but not so loud as to damage your hearing.
Tom, we have a question from Bob Bloom.
Sure, Bob.
I'm sorry, I didn't think I had a question. I see it. Bye.
Okay. There's a typical radio, and some things to note is how do you turn it on? That's with your volume switch. You turn your volume clockwise to increase the volume. You have a squelch knob, and that you want to turn up until you can cut out the background noise, and then turn it back down, give the noise, and turn it back up a little bit to cut out the noise. You may need to adjust that from time to time. The caution here is the higher you turn up the squelch knob, the more you will cut out any weak signals. So if you turn it up too far, you may miss a call, an important call. You have a button on this one, it's labeled ETN, and that allows you to check 1 watt or 25 watts. Most times you're going to want to be on 25 watt. 1 watt would be, for instance, using from one vessel to another in a marina. However, I've never used 1 watt, so 25 watt is where you want to be most of the time. You have a distress button, and that is if your radio is connected to your GPS, you push that, it will send a signal out on channel 70, and you've registered your radio, connected it to the GPS. It will provide information who you are and where you are and your boat description. Very important for distress calls. But you have to have it connected to your GPS or buy a newer radio that has the GPS included in the radio. There is one caution. If you have a metal roof, like my boat does, you will need to put an external antenna because the radio signals don't like to go through metal roofs. Therefore, and that's going to cost you another $100 or so. And I've got 2 radios. I decided I didn't need to buy the 3rd one. And then your channel up and down allows you to select the channel, make sure you're on the correct channel. And on your display, this one says channel 88 or 88. So there you are. Another one that tells the channel that you're on. Another one is a WX button that allows you to connect to the NOAA weather continuous broadcast. You need to know the channel in your area that is specific to your area. Here in Marblehead, Ohio, it's channel 2. There are 10 channels, so you can scroll through and figure out which one is the channel for your area. And of course, finally, on your mic, you have your push to talk button. One caution, some mics have the ability to change the station. Change the channel on the mic. So again, you got to make sure you didn't inadvertently change the channel when you want to talk to someone on the channel, that you're on the right channel. Prohibited practices, violating radio silence. So if you hear a radio silence, you don't want to broadcast in that channel. Unofficial conversations between operators. Transmitting on a directed net without permission, so you have to be part of the net. Excessive tuning or testing for more than 10 seconds. And failure to listen before transmitting. So you're going to transmit, you're going to make a radio call, listen to make sure no one's on the channel, and then make your channel or your call. If someone's using the channel, wait until they're done. Using other than authorized procedure words, and we'll go through those. Unauthorized use of plain language in place of the procedure words. Any other unauthorized use of plain language, and of course, profane language or loss of temper. So, phonetic alphabet. And there it is. And the question is, there's part of it. How do you learn that? One way, you can practice spelling your name phonetically. If you're in the business of writing checks, as you write your first and last name, spell them phonetically. That's one way to start. If you're driving and you see letters on a license plate, you might try to say the letters on a license plate. However, there's a caution. Don't get so close that you leave your front bumper on their back bumper. And there's some more of the phonetic alphabet with the correct pronunciation. And there's the rest of it. So you need to know that. And my story is, what if you're out on patrol and you come across the boat and the last person's name is Myzwinski? Spell that one phonetically. Ted and I worked together years and years ago, and I always tried to remember how to spell Myzwinski. Phonetic figures. Now we have the numbers that we can use and how to pronounce them. Again, you need to practice those and know how to use them with the letters. And how to say some figures. You have the number 44, you're going to say Fowler. 500, you're going to say 500. 700 is 7000. I'm sorry, 7,000. 16,000 is 16000. 14899 is 14899. For decimal points, say decimal. To say somebody has their mic on. we get there. To say
We
one.
also have Tom, we also have a question from Paul Bolden.
Yes, Paul.
There's a hand up.
Yeah, Tom, thank you. Yeah, Tom, during the discussion about the phonetic alphabet, I had noticed like a couple of those, like Victor is Victor.
Yes.
I always said Victor, so that's so it's okay. So Victor would be the correct pronunciation over saying Victor.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay. To say 1, 2, 3 decimal 6, you would say 1, 2, 3 decimal 6. If you're going to spell someone's name, before you spell it, say I spell. That lets the person who's listening, especially the watchstander who's recording this, to say, I'm going to get a bunch of letters. To give a string of numbers, say figures, or many times active duty will say figures follow. And again, you know you're going to be getting a bunch of numbers. To give a mix of numbers, say for NY 1, 2, 3, 4, say I spell November, Yankee, 1, 2, 3, flower. For 129B, say figures, 1, 2, 9er, bravo. For dates, we have 20 August, you would say 20 August. For initials, for W.E. Lewis, you would say initials, Whiskey, Echo, Lewis. And then you'll speak the phonetic alphabet for personal use. And again, practice it. I would do that while driving with the family years ago. So my one daughter would say, Dad, will you stop it? To call or reply, again, check to make sure you're on the proper channel. Listen to be sure there is no traffic on the channel. Speak clearly and slowly in a normal voice, holding the mic about 2 inches from your mouth and out of the wind. The reason from 2 inches from your mouth, there are some letters that when you say them, there is a puff of air, which a mic can pick up. One of those letters is P or B. Put your hand in front of your face and just say P, and you can feel the puff of air. The other way is you can hold the mic sideways, again in front of you, but with the speaker towards the middle of you, and that can help get rid of those puffs. Avoid excessive calling and unofficial traffic. Transmit the call sign only once if conditions are favorable. So sometimes you may have to go more than once, but try getting away with once. You cut down the time of radio use and allowing someone else to use the radio. Remember, the communications are not confidential. Anybody on the channel that you're using can hear what you're saying. After unsuccessful attempts to contact the station, and they're talking about a radio station, another radio, not necessarily a Coast Guard station, transmit the pro word, nothing heard or negative contact. And then wait a while and then try again. Send a transmission at a speed that allows for accurate message copying by the recipient. If you're on patrol, chances are some watchstander at a Coast Guard station has your radio guard. And if you go real fast with it, they will not be able to accurately hear the message, and they may request you to say again because they didn't get it all. So transmit the message by phrase, unkeying the mic at regular intervals. End every transmission with one of the following: over. That means you're looking for the other station to respond back to you. Out. You're saying, I'm done talking and I'm not looking for a response. Transmission is ended. Wait. Wait for a pause that requires more than a few seconds. Wait out. It's used for pauses that require more than a few seconds, and I will call you back. Conduct radio checks to test equipment or when equipment with another unit is doubtful. Make radio checks on a Coast Guard working channel. And there are a number of Marbleheads is 21 Alpha. I believe Toledo was 23 Alpha. I think Belle Isle is or was 21 Alpha also. And the idea, it changes from station to station. So one station isn't interfering with another station. So you need to find out what that is. Radio checks on channel 16 are illegal according to FCC rules. As a suggestion, if you're going to be calling a station for a radio check, I suggest calling the station on a cell phone or landline prior to do the radio checks. You can give them what your call sign is so they know it, and you're going to use your call sign when you do the radio check, and we'll go through how to do one of those here a little bit later. But it's good to give the station a heads up, especially and then when getting underway. In fact, in the Marblehead navigation rules for the auxiliary, we are required to call the watchstander and let them know what our call sign is, number of people on board, and the names of those people. And we do that on a cell phone rather than broadcasting that over a radio channel. When may you be required to do a radio check? Anybody have an answer?
Depends.
Okay, when does it depend?
Well, it depends on that. If you got your radio guard, the difference between a boat and an aircraft, number of engines on the aircraft. We also, it could also be a net radio check that's scheduled at a specific time in a specific order.
Yes. How about when you go through your facility inspection every year?
Absolutely.
So it's worthwhile to know how to do the radio check at least once a year when you're doing your when you're having your facility inspection done. And if you have more than one radio, guess what? You want to do it on both radios.
On both of them.
Yes. So there are some priorities. Distress communications have absolute priority over all other transmissions. And another one is at times a net control station might impose or lift a radio's silence on a directed net. And I've only heard radio silence one time, and that's when the floor at Lanza's Winery collapsed. It goes back a number of years. And it will go like this: all stations, all stations, all stations. This is United States Coast Guard Station Marblehead. Silence, I say again, silence. And you say silence is pronounced as silence. When it's lifted, they'll say Coast Guard Station, all stations, all stations, all stations. This is Coast Guard Station Marblehead, silence lifted. So that was on channel 16. So they wanted no traffic on channel 16 because there were a number of injured people. And I believe there were even some people that were deceased, and they had ferries, and everybody that could get people off of Middle Bass Island was helping. Distress calls. The highest priority is Mayday, and it's usually pronounced Mayday, 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 and followed by this is and the unit's name, and given in order, although not necessarily because people may not know these, the distress unit's position, nature of distress, number of person on board, that's POB, medical condition, if any, age of POBs, if it's pertinent, description of the vessel, any other pertinent information. In standing watch, many times I'll get a radio call that says, Coast Guard, Coast Guard, Coast Guard. And that's all they say. And the response is, vessel calling Coast Guard. This is Coast Guard Station Marblehead. Are you in distress? Over. Sometimes they will hear the word help, and then you will try to get the information and respond as appropriate. Receiving unit Receiving unit should acknowledge the receipt of the message by received Mayday. And then, you may have to ask for this information to find out all the details of the data. They may not know what information is really needed. Urgent communications, there's PON that is usually announced on channel 16, maybe broadcast on channel 16, and it might be there's a log across the entrance to the Portage River in Port Clinton, Ohio. Could be a tree off of in the Maumee River in Toledo or anywhere else. It could be that they've received a report of a overdue vessel and last known position and description of the vessel, and they're going to ask you to or report that to the address to all stations and ask if you see that vessel or whatever, call the station. Many times it's, in our case, would be Sector Detroit. Okay, so urgent communications have priority over all the others except distress. There's a safety one. Safety broadcast use the same procedure as urgent. Use the safety signal pronounced securite, and they'll say securite 3 times, and they'll say this is, and many times they'll say listen channel 22 alpha or some other channel. Many times we hear that in our area. We have a coal dock in Sandusky, and we'll hear securite, securite, securite. This is the Roger Blau. We will be leaving the Lower Lakes coal dock in 20 minutes, letting everybody who happens to be on the channel know that this 600-foot freighter or better that is filled with coal is coming out the channel. So some commonly used pro words, and as we go through this, I've highlighted the ones in yellow that happen commonly. So you'll hear the word break. You'll hear correction. When an error has been made, you've said something incorrect, you'll say correction and then correct the transmission. You have figures. Again, we talked about figures or figures follow, saying that numbers or numerals follow. There are the other ones there: disregard, execute, and exempt. And then I spell. You're going to spell a word. You want to say I spell. Lets the person know that you're spelling something. If they're writing it down, it's really helpful to know that letters are coming. Of course, negative means no, and out means no reply is required or expected, and over is a reply is required or expected, and they don't get used together. If you think about that, if you say over and out, what you've just said is, I want to reply, but I don't want to reply. So they're mutually exclusive. Roger, I have satisfactorily received your last transmission. Many times I hear copy or how copy, as we've already gone through the C's. If you notice, the word copy is not in there for commonly used pro words, but people use that. If I'm standing watch at the station and we're doing ops in position and I get the ops in position, sometimes I'll hear, how copy? My answer is Roger. Say again, repeat all of your message. We talked about silence, speak slower. And this is, when you're calling, this is whatever identifies your station. It could be Coast Guard Auxiliary, and then your assigned facility number. You have wait and wait out. We talked about that. Wilco, I received your message, understand and will comply. You may need to be careful with that if somebody asks you to do that, especially if it's from a station. Make sure the OOD really has authorized you to do that. So you might ask, may I check with the OOD, officer of the day? Okay, here's some verbiage, and I want to give a shout out to William Schlick, who helped me with this, and also my wife, Marianne, who started with my original communications PowerPoint that I did. She did some of the graphics on it. William and I worked together in presenting this a number of times, and he certainly helped me make it a little more user friendly. And this is just, we're just going to use the Marblehead one so we have time for questions. So we're going to do a radio check. Remember, we've called this station and we told them we're going to do a radio check. We want to use channel 16 and we want to use 21 alpha. And 21 alpha is the channel. It's going to be our primary channel. It's a channel that as we get underway, we're going to be communicating to and from the station. So we're going to say Coast Guard Station Marblehead, Coast Guard Station Marblehead. This is Coast Guard Auxiliary 231130, 231130, channel 16, over. They should reply, Coast Guard Auxiliary 231130. This is Station Marblehead. Switch and answer primary. Station out. So now we both switch to 21 alpha. And the vessel is going to say station aux 130. After you make initial contact, you can abbreviate what your call sign. We chose aux 130, which are the last three numbers for facility, and aux for auxiliary. Request radio checks on channel 16 and 21 alpha, over. Station comes, yes.
You have a question from Scott Lebo.
Okay, Scott.
All right, thank you. I did not see the I did not see II. Is that something that's another branch of the military?
II is not listed on the common words on the radio.
Okay, and will this PowerPoint be available? You email that out after the training?
Yes.
Yes.
Roger that.
You're welcome. So the station has said station out, and we both switched to 21 alpha. Station aux 130. I'm sorry, the vessel saying station aux 130, request radio checks on channels 16 and 21 alpha, over. Station comes back aux 130, station, I have you loud and clear, or Lima Charlie on both. How me, over. Vessel comes back, station aux 130, I have you the same, nothing further, 130 out. That is pretty much the same way the Coast Guard does their radio checks every morning with their vessels, except they're using their hull numbers. And a lot of people like to throw in Coast Guard Auxiliary Facility, or they'll say this is facility. The preferred way would be to say Coast Guard Auxiliary. That would make sense to the watchstander at the station. Facility, I don't know, is going to help them, so you don't need the word facility. So we're getting away on primary channel. Vessel is going to say Coast Guard Station Marblehead, Coast Guard Station Marblehead. This is Coast Guard Auxiliary 231130, 231130. Again, the numbers, say them slowly because they're not familiar with our numbers. And they need to know that. Station, Coast Guard Auxiliary 231130. This is Coast Guard Station Marblehead, over. The vessel says station, aux 130, underway, 03 POB. That's persons on board. GAR, low medium. Request you take our radio guard, over. Station, aux 130, roger, or roger, station out. The station may ask you where you're patrolling. They may give you your underway time. They may say ops in position every 30 mics. Mics is an abbreviation for minutes. So we're out and about, and the station calls us, and they say, aux 130, station, request your ops in position, over. The vessel says, station, aux 130, ops normal position, Sandusky Bay Junction buoy, over. Station goes back, aux 130, roger, or roger, station out. That was a geographic location. Some stations allow geographic locations, some stations do not. So know what your station, what you're allowed to use. Station, this is going to be for a latitude, longitude. Stations, Aux 130 station, request your ops and position. Vessel says station, Aux 130, ops normal, position figures as follow: 41 degrees, 41 degrees, 37.56 north by 082 degrees, 41.32 west, over. Station says Roger, or Roger, station out. Temporary break in the patrol. We're going to contact the station. Station Marblehead, Aux 130 over. Aux 130 station over. Station Aux 130, we are temp moored at Battery Park, over. Temp moored means we're temporarily moored, and they're not going to ask us for ops and position until we get back underway.
Tom, we have another question from Steve Daniel.
Okay, Steve.
Good morning, Tom. Say, just a point of reference for here in, we work with Station Duluth up here in Lake Superior. And what they have asked us to do, rather than use our auxiliary facility number, is our Minnesota registration number, or Wisconsin registration number. So we would just say this is 3093KH, which is my registration number on the boat. And the reason they do that is we have given them all that information ahead of time, and that's in the system, and they can look up all the details on your boat that way. I'm not sure that they have access to all our facility information, but that was an interesting point, and we've been doing that for a few years now at their request.
Whatever the station wants you to use. We use our facility number.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, that's perfectly, the stations that controlling people, if they want your registration number, then use your registration number. And I'm glad you said you had a 0 in there and you didn't say, oh, thank you for saying 0.
The other part of that is that each station does have access to aux data, which lists your facilities several different ways, and they can run the report whatever the way they would like. The AUXLO and the OIAs have access to that information.
Okay. So we've taken we've told the station we're going to take a temporary break. Now we're getting underway. Station Marblehead, Aux 130 over. Station is going to reply Aux 130, station over. Station Aux 130, we are underway from Battery Park, over. Station's going to come back and say Aux 130, station, Roger, station out. Many times I hear on this one, I'll hear people will say 3 POB. They'll throw in the persons on board. And the only time you need to do that is if one person has gotten off the boat. So now you're down to 2, or you've put another person on the boat. And in that case where we had 3, now you're up to 4. That way, that you do need to know that, so that a person is no longer on the vessel, or you've added a person. But if it stays the same, you don't need to let them know that you still have 3 persons on board. Ending in patrol. Station, Aux 130 over. Station replies, Aux 130, station, over. Vessel replies, station, Aux 130, we are moored and request to enter patrol. Thank you for your assistance, over. Station may reply, just Roger, or may say, Aux 130, station, Roger, have a good night, station out. But it's always worthwhile to thank the station for your assistance. If you're on a night patrol, there may be a watchstander who is up past the time when they would normally give the radio guard back to sector. So they've got some person who's up longer than what he normally would be. So, and In any other case, there's going to, thank them for their assistance because they're doing a little extra work working with the auxiliary. Any questions?
Hi, Tom, this is Nat. Can you hear
Okay.
me? I
Yes.
don't have a question. I just have a comment. We're very often 3, 4, 5 hours away from the station, and we're doing comms on the phone with them. And Steve Daniels underway in Duluth, and I'm way over on Leech Lake, and they've got their own vessel. They got a lot going on. I always make a point when I call us in to get underway to greet them and ask them, "Hey, how you doing today?" And it makes a huge difference on their day and just their willingness to have a radio guard with that extra work of doing it on the phone.
Nice way to do it. Thank you. Okay, that's the end of it. There's thank you. And just so that we know how to use the phonetic alphabet, that's Tango, Hotel, Alpha, November, Kilo, Yankee, Oscar, Uniform. So thank you for your time. And if there's any other questions, now's the time.
Tom, Steve Daniel.
Yes.
I have my hand up there. I had a situation with my radios where sometimes when we're getting ready to get underway, the station can't hear us when we call in, and they've asked us in the past to call in on our cell phone. And I don't know if there's dead spots, they're on this Minnesota point, and it's kind of weird. And I did replace one of my 2 radios. I keep one radio on channel 16 and one on 21 Alpha, but it's kind of weird. And I wondered, do the radios go bad after about 10 years? Because I had a situation we were helping with the July 4th fireworks, and I had the Vista Queen tour boat right next to us, probably about 30 feet away, and they were hailing me. I could hear them on my radio, but they could not hear me respond on my mic. And I'm just wondering, do these things go bad after a while? Because I think I'm going to have to replace the second radio as well.
They
So
may go bad.
Hang on just a second. One person at a time. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead and respond, please.
They may go bad. However, the problem may have been that you were so close to their boat that the antennas weren't communicating to each other. And the reason I say that is at Marblehead, sometimes they'll have one of their boats in the boathouse, which they will pull out of the boathouse and raise the antenna and try to call and do their morning radio checks, and we can't hear them because they're so close to the building it's blocking the signal. It could have been your proximity to that larger boat.
Okay, thank you.
And in addition to that, if you get a radio transmitter strength signal, a lot of times your connection, or you may have a broken antenna wire some point along the way. The Shakespeare makes a power output, and it'll tell you if your radio is actually transmitting out 25 watts. Usually by the time it gets through the antenna, at the end of the antenna, you're probably only, if let's say you have a 10-foot lead and an 8-foot antenna, probably by the end of the end of the run, you're only really transmitting with probably 19, 20 watts. So each connection is usually a probable cause. That's the way we recommend people checking them, working as a employee of West Marine part-time. There are some radio service places in our area that check them for you. You just would have to check in your area.
Thank you.
Scott, you have a second question.
Thank you. Yes, as part of the requirements for AUX-PAD, we're supposed to have a waterproof walkie-talkie that can actually be submerged. Any suggestions as to where to find one of those?
There's a definition from submerged, and there's a class rating on it. So if you're talking about a handheld, or are you talking about a walkie-talkie? Two different questions.
I believe it's a walkie-talkie because we're in a kayak where we could become submerged ourselves.
Okay.
I think it's a handheld, Chris.
Yeah, it would be a handheld. Thank you, Commodore Thorough. Yeah, it would be a handheld, and most have a rating on them of being water resistant or waterproof. You want to go with the waterproof one, which means that it has to be, it can survive a certain depth, which is usually 3 atmospheres for more than 7 minutes, is a general waterproofing, water resistant radio. And then waterproof would be that same 3 atmospheres at a longer distance. I believe the time's like 45 minutes, that it will not intrude any water. And that's only with all the covers in it. Does that help
Roger
you, sir?
that. Yes.
I'll double check on that, and I will get back with you on that in an email. Commodore Mark Villeneuve, you have a question, sir.
Not so much a question, just some more feedback on radio seeming not to transmit but receive. Experience, although Shakespeare says it shouldn't happen with their fiberglass antennas. Over time, with the whip action on that antenna, you can get internal fracture of the wiring. So as Chris mentioned, it's usually not the radio, it's the connections to the antenna and including the antenna that should be troubleshot in a manner to define where the issue is.
Thank you, Commodore, for your comment. I have you, who is an unknown user. You have a question. You have a hand up. Hearing none. Kurt Whitman.
Yes, just to follow up on Mark's comments. One of the things that can happen is as those antennas get bad, they can also create a short. And as that happens, then when you transmit with your power with your radio, you can burn out the amplifier side in the radio itself. And so I would always recommend that you look at an SWR check with you can borrow from somebody, which will give you the ratio and the signal. By doing that, then you can guard your radio, because you can burn out a very good radio with a bad antenna. And the second comment, Chris, is just that I find that when we're under sector guard, we have to be very, very watchful of the time. They will not let you walk away from about 1 or 2 minutes from their time. So it's very important that you stay on the clock and the watch.
Thank you, Kurt, for your comments. Also, one of the other aspects of that is a lot of times the repeaters that are going on, that's the link from station to station. Sometimes they'll lose that link. So if that happens, like up in the Minnesota area where you were talking about, Stephen, it happens down in the Detroit sector area, especially around Algonac. They'll lose a repeater. We usually just make a call into the station and let them know the repeater is down, and they can reboot that. So hope that helps. We're at 11:47. We have any other questions?
Yeah, Chris, I have one more comment on the, I think it was from Steve Daniel. There are, in some locations, dead areas where a signal just doesn't get through for one reason or another. So there are certain dead areas, maybe, depending on your location.
Chris, I think you could call on your unknown user again. I heard him pop in just as Mark started, if he wants to ask his question.
Oh, please. Thank you, Commodore. Please do.
Yeah, this is Jim Munger. I'm not sure why my name's not showing up there, but I just pass on an experience that we had last year at Charlevoix Boat School when we had aircraft in the air. And if the aircraft was directly over the boat, there was an issue with that, because apparently in that particular one, the aircraft's VHF antenna must have been on the top, and it literally blocked the signal off. Now at the comm center, we could hear both of them, but they could not communicate with each other. So they just heads up with that. If you're going from plane to boat, if that plane is pretty much over top of you, you might not be able to hear them, and they might not be able to hear you.
Thank you. Great comment, Jim. Also, Commodore Thorough suggested that if you're using a handheld, and the majority of them are out there are now floating handhelds, make sure that especially with a kayak, because of the environment that you work in, that handheld is not only waterproof but floatable, and they make very small units now. They're very reasonable. I believe they start at about $99 when they're on special. We got a couple specials coming up. I know that. Some of our boats will have 10 or 12 radios on board. Sometimes when we go out on patrol, how many radios we got? 6. Got more radios than people. So, Tom, thank you very much. Are there any final questions?
Not a question, Chris, but just some feedback for Scott. No, I don't work for this company, but the standard Horizon HX890, you may not want to get that fancy, has 1.5 meter submersible capability to standard IPX8 for 30 minutes as an example. So they are out there.
Is that
Roger
the blue
that.
one,
Thank you.
Mark, that you have? Is that
Pardon
the blue
me?
one you have? Is that your blue one?
Yeah, that's the blue one. I don't work for Standard Horizon, but they make a very good product.
They
Good.
really do. It is one of the good standards.